and said, well, COVID came, and there's nothing he could do except to borrow and to draw down on the HSF. But when he came to the country 4 months ago, he knew that COVID was going to challenge government revenue sources. He knew that COVID was going to challenge businesses, that taxes from both businesses and individuals would fall. He said so in Budget 2021. But what did he do to address that? What did he do to fix it? Ladies and gentlemen, the opposition UNC has proved that COVID did not collapse this economy. The facts speak for themselves. From 2016 to 2019, the Trinidad and Tobago economy contracted by 10% in real terms. In 2020, the economy was expected to contract by more than 6%, and if the minister's figures are any indication, the economy will shrink even more. But knowing that the economic pie was shrinking and the debt burden was growing, it is a shame that the minister's only commitment to the country is to tell citizens that more of the same is going to come. With no new revenue sources, with no new foreign exchange being generated to replace what has been removed from our reserves, the government has converted the Heritage and Stabilization Fund into its primary source of foreign exchange, and like a piper on steroids, appeared intent to draw down continuously until it is depleted. According to the central bank, the net official reserves of Trinidad and Tobago stood at US $6.95 billion, or 8 months import cover 2 months ago, December 2020. This government has been borrowing to buy US to pay its debt. They are in effect borrowing to repay loans, driving up even greater debt in return. A piper on steroids. Central government, and this is very, very worrying, central government external debt stood at 13.76 billion TT dollars equivalent as at September 2015 when this government came into office. As at November 30th, 2020, the last bit of information that we have, as at November 30th, 2020, central government external debt outstanding stood at a grand total of 31.55 billion TT dollars equivalent. This represents an increase of 132% under this Minister of Finance. What does that mean for you? When you try now to get money to shop online and you cannot get foreign exchange, it is because the government has taxed you out, it has maxed you out, it is holding the foreign exchange for themselves. When you cannot get foreign exchange to import, when businessmen cannot get foreign exchange to import food in this country, when supermarkets' shelves are vacant, when businesses are closing because they cannot get access to foreign exchange, this is the reason why. This is how the external debt affects you. What is more frightening is that as this figure grows, with the government becoming increasingly dependent on foreign exchange from the HSF to make repayments, the government is now literally at a point where the value of the savings in the Heritage and Stabilization Fund almost equates our foreign debt component. That means that if we draw down all the money in the Heritage and Stabilization Fund now, we will just only be able to repay external debt. And the government continues to borrow. I ask again, where will the government find the money to repay these debts? In his budget speech just 4 months ago, Minister Imbert boasted about resetting the economy for growth and innovation. We were already in the throes of COVID-19 pandemic. He gave false hope, false revenue figures, knowing that he would not have been able to meet the figures that he projected. We told him that in the budget debate, repeatedly told him that. They knew that government revenue from tax would be low due to suppressed world demand for energy, mass unemployment, and therefore lower tax access, lower demand, and therefore reduced corporation tax. What did you do as a result of that to stimulate small businesses to survive the economic slowdown? Nothing. Instead, he's coming now to raise the rates that these businesses will have to pay. He's coming now to further jeopardize and threaten the pockets of the average citizens. I want to raise two more issues. Economic health is premised on the health of citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. I turn to vaccines. To date, despite multiple questions in the Parliament, this government has been unable to tell this country when we will get COVID-19 vaccines. What do vaccines have to do with the economy? I'm sure my colleague would raise some other issues, but let me just indicate what happens now. Imagine Stuart Young has closed the borders so that Trinidadians cannot come in. Trinidadians and others cannot come in. But just now, Trinidad and Tobago will open its borders, but no Trinis will be able to travel because we would not have had access to the vaccines which the rest of the world would have had. I was advised recently that the United States is vaccinating 1.3 million people per day. That is the equivalent of Trinidad and Tobago population. We were told that Trinidad and Tobago was #1 in the world in coping with COVID. That should mean that we should have been #1 in the world with our business sector rebounding, with our citizens having access to the best health care, including access to the vaccines. I call on the Minister of National Security, I call on the Prime Minister, and I call on the Minister of Finance to tell us, just as our colleague in Barbados approached the government of India and were able to get vaccines in their country, already landed and are currently vaccinating their countries. Whether Trinidad and Tobago has made any overture to the government of India for support in securing vaccines for our citizens. Because while we were #1 several months ago, right now we are at the bottom of the barrel. Everywhere else is vaccinating except Trinidad and Tobago. We did not have to get here. This is not how it's supposed to be. My last issue deals with the National Insurance Board. It is one of those other issues, one of those other places that the government has been taxing to take money from to do its needs. There are two critical pieces of data that the government has hid from this country. It has hidden from this country. The true level of unemployment. Since 2018, we have been waiting for that figure, and the state of the National Insurance Fund. This is critical because this, like the Heritage and Stabilization Fund, is a nest egg which is supposed to serve the citizens of this country in their time of need. They have used the National Insurance Board to fund various initiatives of the government. A few years ago, the management of the board warned that the fund was in danger of becoming insolvent, that the demands on the fund were greater than the capacity of the fund to service it. What that means when you have a situation like that is that when you are ill and you apply for NIS benefits, you may not be able to access it because of the fact that the fund may not be solvent. I am advised that the minister is currently in breach of his statutory duty to account to the Parliament and to the country. The NIB report was laid on the minister's desks several months ago, months and months ago. I am advised that he has sat on that because he does not want the country to know the true state of the National Insurance Fund. Given that unemployment has increased by over 300% in the last 5 years, I can confirm, as an economist myself, that the state of the fund, bad several months ago, it would be absolutely worse now because there would now be less contributions to the National Insurance Fund. And that is why the government is hiding the information. The government also signaled its malintent to WASA, TNTEC, TT Post, the port, and is seeking to increase the burdens on an already overburdened population of Trinidad and Tobago. I had asked earlier what the government's plan was to treat with the crises that they knew were coming. Several months ago, the government brought forward a roadmap. And on the basis of the roadmap, they revised it when COVID-19 came about. And they came to the country campaigning for general elections and for local government elections and for THA elections that they had a plan. Where's that plan now? It seems that the roadmap created by Colman Burt, Keith Rowley, and his band of warriors, that roadmap has crashed. And Trinidad and Tobago is now spiraling significantly and quickly into the valley of death. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you all. I turn over to my colleague, the Member of Parliament for Mayaro, who will treat with how these events, piloted by the Minister of Finance, are affecting every citizen of this country. MP.
Thank you very much, MP Tanku, and good morning again, members of the public, members of the media, and my colleagues here. I'm going to follow straight through with the platform that MP Tanku has started in a brazen and bold-faced attempt to deceive. The Minister of Finance confessed two truths on Wednesday. Truth number one, the country has run out of money. And truth number two, the Keith Rowley administration has run out of lies. They cannot lie to the country anymore. For 6 years, this Minister of Finance has piled deception on top of deception in his handling of this economy. Let me just quickly tell you how. In 2015, empowering our people through sustained economic growth and prosperity. In 2016, restoring confidence and rebuilding trust. Let's do this together. In 2017, shaping a brighter future, a blueprint for transformation and growth. 2018, changing the paradigm, putting the economy on track. In 2019, a turnaround. In 2020, stability, strength, and growth. And in 2021, resetting the economy for growth and innovation. The cost of that deception to the taxpayers of Trinidad and Tobago so far has been $323 billion. Now, we have a problem in this country that we don't understand how much $1 billion is. $1 billion is 1,000 million. For where we are today, and at the end of fiscal 21, that figure is going to be $373 billion. I don't think we have to come here as an opposition to paint a picture of what's happening in the wider economy, because citizens of this country is living it every day. The Minister of Finance last week saw an opportunity, again, very deceptive Trojan horse, while the country was campaigning and mourning the loss of a citizen and decrying and complaining of the failure of the government to protect the citizens. The Minister of Finance comes with this Trojan horse and speaks a bit of truth, the true status of economy. We have to borrow, we have to dip into the HSL just to pay salaries and wages. If that is not a failure by a government, I am not sure what is. Now, mind you, the collapse of our economic ecosystem was red flagged way back in 2018 when Terence Farrell, head of the Economic Advisory Board, quit in disgust by the attitude of the Rowley administration. It also seems, and as MP Tanku said, the 2020 Roadmap Committee plan as well has been relegated to the debt of dustbin, because not a single policy decision in that roadmap plan was clearly defined in the 2021 fiscal package. And the Rowley government has been in the economic doldrums since then. Ladies and gentlemen, I am shadowing the portfolio of trade and industry and enterprises. And my observation is how the country is performing based on strategic plans of the government in terms of how it is affecting small business, local investment, foreign direct investments. How do these items affect the standard of living of our citizens? Even with the unprecedented economic crisis in this country, the Rowley administration has not created an enabling environment for neither domestic or international investments. Trinidad and Tobago, in 2021, we are still ranked at number 105 out of 190 countries in the World Rating of the Ease of Doing Business Index. In his budget address, the Minister of Finance in October of 2020, he said, "We are making every effort on improving the existing measurable benchmarks, many of which are totally unacceptable." So in 2020, he confessed that that was unacceptable. And $373 billion later, we are nowhere closer to fixing that. Nothing has been done in this fiscal year so far. For example, it takes 254 days to receive a construction permit in this country, 61 days to obtain an electricity connection, if you're lucky, 77 days to register a property, 65 days to secure credit. And the list can go on and on and on by the failures in the ease of doing business. The investment climate in Trinidad and Tobago continues to remain poor, and this precludes any financial flows from investors as well. Over the last 5.5 years, the Rowley's government mismanagement, several key investors have fled Trinidad and Tobago. They include ArcelorMittal, which shut down its steel manufacturing plant at the Point Lisas estate, sent home 644 workers, but it created a negative ripple effect among downstream manufacturers. Now, we must understand ArcelorMittal, which produced direct reduced iron, steel billets, wire rods, was the largest foreign exchange earner outside of the energy sector. And we let them go without an input from the state. That company, ladies and gentlemen, accounted for 84.2% of total manufacturing exports. So when we ask why are we in a foreign exchange crisis, it is because of the poor planning, the poor response to these issues by the government. The closure of the company had led to a subsequent contraction of the domestic manufacturing sector. Another company that has basically fled our island is Unilever. Unilever, which has been operating in Trinidad and Tobago since 1929. They shut down their operations, their production operations in 2019 and sent home another 300 workers. Now, what is important about Unilever? Unilever sells butter and margarine and Breeze detergent. And if the citizens of this country cannot afford to buy butter and Breeze, then it says a whole lot to the ability for our working poor and middle class to get by in this country. Unilever had to shut down its production operations. In 2019, the government said it would record a $7.6 billion in private sector investments in 2021. But there is no evidence 5 months later of any sort of such investment. Private corporations have a total of about $13 billion packed up in financial institutions. As of today, I think it's about $11.5 billion in cash liquidity in commercial banks. Now, when there is so much of liquidity in commercial banks, it means that nobody wants to borrow. Nobody wants to invest. That speaks to a lack of confidence in the economy. So businesses, private investors, we are happy to keep our money in the bank and earn 0.25% interest than take a risk to find new business or to go into new entrepreneurial activities. That causes a depression in further employment capacity and ability of this island. And that is a serious issue, and the government has been unable to address that up to today. Look at the local manufacturing sector. they have been calling for the last 2 or 3 years for regulatory and legislative reform, but this too has fallen on deaf ears. Manufacturers want improvements with respect to customs and excise. Look at what is happening on the port today. You upgraded the Asecuda system, and in good ITC practice, you put it in a test platform, you test all your components, and when you are satisfied that it is working, you put it on your production platform. The minute the upgrade was done, it collapsed the entire port operation from the customs and excise perspective. There are businesses in this country that has goods in containers going in months, and they can't get it out. And not only is your goods being unable to get to market, there's financing costs, storage costs to have your goods on the market. But yet the government has done nothing to alleviate that problem. VAT refunds, curbing the illicit trade. We came to Parliament on Friday. We passed the tobacco amendments with regards to the new packaging of cigarettes to help curb the use of tobacco. But the state has not made any effort to deal with the illicit importation of cigarettes that will bear no marking and easier access on the illegal market. Again, the government has failed to address those issues. The TTMA has repeatedly called for trade facilitation systems. The TTMA, which I support, wants to double their non-energy manufacturing exports by 2025. But yet, the government, through its Ministry of Trade, has done nothing substantial that is going to pave the way to allow our manufacturers to move in that particular direction. The Minister of Finance, in October again, he said that we will support the manufacturing sector in its quest to double exports by 2025, expand employment, and exceed its current contribution of approximately 19% of GDP. He said the deficiencies and structural rigidities which exist within the sector would be addressed. But so far, I have seen nothing done. In my examination of the sector, of the industry, I have not seen any considerable procedure and plan by the state that would allow that. Simple example, for the manufacturing sector is still owed about $6 billion in VAT refund. Now, mind you, last year, the Minister of Finance paid some money that was VAT refund, and he called it a stimulus. But you cannot pay people money that you owe them that is going to fill a gap in their working capital and say that it's a stimulus. So the benefit that the minister was hoping that this injection would have been a stimulus, it fell flat because it was not a stimulus. It went to pay a debt that these companies would have been owing for years based on the non-payment of VAT by the state. I want to turn to quickly on the issue around our SMEs in this country. They continue to suffer under this callous administration, and many are closing down every day. Now, small and micro enterprises is the highest employer on the island. Small businesses, family businesses, they employ more people than any government sector. And it is the same all over the world. At its peak, there were more than 25,000 SMEs in Trinidad and Tobago, employing about 250,000 workers. And this contributed about 32% of GDP. Scores of SMEs have closed down as a result of business shutdown caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, but were already under severe pressure prior to the COVID-19 protocols being in effect. The government response has not been effective or even far-reaching in any effect. The stimulus measures to support the sector have not gone far enough, and it has not reached the bulk of the SMEs on this island. Now, in addition to large corporations, which remain open throughout the pandemic, they rushed into sectors where many of the SMEs operated. They include, and you'd be amazed, vegetable marts, stationery stores, computers, meat and poultry shops, textile, bakeries, pharmacies, doubles. Economies of scale have allowed these large operators to thrive, while SMEs have fallen like flies. The government is guilty of supporting big business at the expense of mom-and-pop community stores, which provide employment to the ordinary citizen. Most progressive governments worldwide have given extensive support to their SMEs, but not this PNM administration. They have left SMEs to suffer and fall. Instead, the government has propped up their friends and their finances. I want to look quickly at a crisis that is looming in the construction sector. And one may ask why the construction sector is critical in an economy like ours. Worldwide, when a government wants to heat up an economy, to drive an economy, construction is a very easy opportunity to put low-skilled and semi-skilled people to work. We have a huge increase in construction costs, which is taking place now because of a dramatic rise in steel prices over the last few months. The increased steel prices have been caused by a sudden and high international demand for the product after the COVID-19 led to the shutdown by steel mills all over the world. As economic activity picked up across the world, there is now an accompanying increased demand for steel. Manufacturers have not been able to get up to full production to meet the steep market demands. In addition, steel makers are factoring such costs as higher freight charges, which have been increased almost fourfold, and the cost of the COVID-19 safety protocols. Steel manufacturers have also been paying higher prices for iron ore, a vital input in the production of the product. These costs are being passed on. Would you believe there is also today a shortage of shipping containers? Steel prices have gone up locally by almost 100%. For example, reinforcement rods, rebars, which previously retailed at around $4,200 a ton, is now selling at more than 8,000 TT dollars a ton. The international forecast for rebars is that it should top anywhere around 10,000 TT dollars a ton within the next coming months. As you would know, rebars are essential components in all infrastructure and housing projects. All other home and construction projects would require significantly more funding. The cost to build your homes are going to go up considerably. New mortgages would now be increased. I don't know if you're aware that banks have already introduced a 1% commitment fee on mortgages. Although a mortgage earns interest, borrowers are now being made to pay an additional charge called a commitment fee. Over time, consumers will have to pay more for cars, commercial vehicles, and other imported products that have significant steel inputs. And this situation is made more complex by the local foreign exchange crisis, which MP Tanku spoke about, which is limiting the volume of imports that downstream manufacturers and fabricators could purchase. The steel prices increase is going to curtail the movement in the construction industry, and is going to lead to further job pressure. Now, one would have thought that a creative government, a creative administration, looking at the struggle of the small business sector where you employ a lot of the low-skilled, semi-skilled persons, the construction sector is an area that can absorb. It would have absorptive capacity to bring this section of the population into gainful employment. But again, they have no plan, they have no depth of their strategic thinking to see where can we mix and match the resources to lead this country in a different direction. What could have been done? The government, this PNM Rowley administration, has been typically tardy in responding to any crisis over the last 5 years. At the onset of this one, an alert, an aggressive administration should have been proactive and should have held discussions with representatives of all primary stakeholders. The government should have pledged to work with all industry partners to seek viable solutions. The government can still consider today waiving or lowering the relevant tariffs and duties to help keep the cost of construction down and to drive the construction sector forward. A creative solution that the government could have pursued. There are thousands of tongue and country plans, building plans, sitting at the tongue and country division. The state can expedite the processing of these plans and let people take those plans to the bank and use the $13 billion that are sitting in commercial banks and build their homes and commercial properties and put people to work. But that is not the case of this government. They lack creativity, they lack imagination, and they cannot figure how to put these simple things together to take Trinidad and Tobago forward. The government is running the risk by some of their trade policies over the last couple months of creating monopolies. Cement is one of the most appropriate examples. The government has imposed heavy taxation on imported cement and has imposed restrictions on imports. The government may argue that it is supporting local industry, but at the same time, it is establishing virtual monopolies, which has implication for prices and quality of the product to the consumer. The situation with respect to cement follows the virtual monopoly in the manufacturing and supply of red clay blocks. There is also a virtual monopoly with respect to certain industrial chemicals. The government must insist that fair market competition prevails. We have a Fair Trade Commission in Trinidad and Tobago. They must be empowered to ensure that product monopolies are not created by government policies. And we are on the road to that if it is not dealt with right away. There must be an urgent review of all applicable trade and competition laws. In closing, the shallowness and hollowness of this Keith Rowley's administration was stripped bare naked by COVID-19. The absolute lack of depth in strategic thinking has left Trinidad and Tobago in a critical state requiring surgical intervention. Sadly, the Rowley administration neither have the will nor the imagination which is required to bring Trinidad and Tobago on track. Although it is unusual times, it is business as usual for the Rowley administration. The government has declared war on the working poor and the middle class. Raiding the HSF is not a plan. The Rowley administration is leaving a catastrophic debt for the children and grandchildren in this country. I am sure that the next vigil to be hosted by the citizens of this country will be one for the death of this economy if urgent and immediate action is not taken by this failed Rowley administration. Thank you very much. Be open to any questions.
One, but slightly off the topic. The evidence bill that, I mean, it was quite an eventful week generally in the country outside of Parliament, may have translated to things happening in Parliament. And we don't know, is that like a portend, is that likely to be a portend for other crime bills which the two sides have not yet been ad idem on? Was there a particular sticking point, or you know, that could be translated into these other bills? I know there was the anti-gang bill supposed to come back 6 months later. Any thoughts on that, or was it just a sign of the times?
No. Our party, under the leadership of Colonel Prasad Bisesa, has always been very straight on this matter that we will support good legislation. Every single piece of legislation that comes before the Parliament, before us, will be dealt on an individual basis. The only person, in my recollection, who spreaded some sort of conversation about how the UNC would have voted on that bill was the Attorney General. And that was peddled throughout the national media and so on. We will make a decision as a party, as an opposition, on the merits, case by case, of every piece of legislation. And you're right. There are issues of law. There are issues of procedural matters in the law. There are some that I am sure, and MP Tanku could speak on it after, that we will be willing to tell the government, look, we know it's not going to work, but in the interest of the country, we'll give you some support on it. But every single bill and the bills that are going to come into the future will be dealt with on an individual basis. And it's not to say because we had support on the evidence bill that every other bill is going to come with a carte blanche support. We will continue to do our mandate as an opposition to look at legislation. And I can tell you this, if the best legislation comes to our parliament, we have a duty to punch holes at it. And our duty is when we punch holes and the government sees the hole, they can make legislation better. And that's the role of the opposition. Our job is to help the government put good legislation, and we'll continue doing our duty as time goes on.
All right, I have a question. Sure. So, you essentially have put forward some recommendations for the unemployment level that the country is facing with at the moment.
Yeah.
As it pertains to the debts that the country is facing, what recommendations would you, put to the government or recommend to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, as this is an issue that we all face together, and to the business community?
So, if I may just respond, Dave. Debt is somehow a taboo word. But debt is not a bad word, right? But debt must be used in a constructive and particular way. Our position is, if you are using the HSF, if you are borrowing money, a portion or a large part of it must be put back into something productive that can put the economy on a good footing. But borrowing to pay recurrent expenditure alone is not wise debt. We are saying that as of today, the government has not put forward any reasonable, rational plan, or even in a transparent manner, that this is how we are borrowing money, this is where we're going to take the money from the HSF, this is what we're going to spend it on. We expect a percentage of it to be put into construction, into new business. Now, I want to also say that the National Transformation Plan, which the UNC put forward as our campaign and manifesto promise, we address these matters because we knew, we had the foresight, we had the vision that at some point in time, these matters will need to be addressed. If we go back to that plan, to finance a lot of those things, we would have had to borrow money, yes. But when you look at the investment in ICT, in digital nomad, our plan spoke about intelligent municipalities, how to bring services to people, cut costs down. We talk about a modern agricultural sector, vertical farming. We also spoke about how we're going to use clear and open, unused space left aside in the energy sector to put vertical farming, to look at new markets. Look, one thing that is glaring, the Galeota Point Phase 2 project, which is something that has been left to rot by this administration. That facility was earmarked under the People's Partnership Administration, primarily with the intention to be able to raise foreign currency and revenue with the impending oil and energy markets in Guyana and Suriname. And that was in 2013, 2014. In 2016, the government collapsed that plan. But do you know what? Today in Guyana, they have one FSOP operating, and that one vessel has 5 drill ships and 50 supply vessels. 50% of that marine fleet is sitting in Point Lisa or in Chaguaramas. Now by 2024, Guyana is earmarked to have 5 of those FPSOs. You're looking at 100 drilling ships and about 1,000 supply vessels. The investment or the debt that we could borrow to finish the phase 2 of the Galeota Point facility can be a huge U.S. revenue earner for Trinidad and Tobago. This is a type of forward thinking that we provided our manifesto. So, as I'm saying, debt is not a bad thing. Debt used in a wrong way puts us in the problem that we are in today.
Okay, sorry, Samantha, I didn't quite understand this abbreviation, FPSO.
Okay, it's floating production, operation, and storage vessels, because you know Guyana's oil is sitting in deep waters in their blocks. So there is no land activity or what you call shallow water drilling.
Okay.
It's happening in 4,000 to 5,000 feet of water. So what happens? They drill, they produce, they store, they filter, and then they offload on tankers to ship out. All the activity is done out in the open ocean. Yes.
Okay. So what role Galeota in
Galeota's plan in 2013 was Galeota would have been the new shipping city in Trinidad and Tobago. The People's Partnership envisioned Galeota to create a hub for maritime activities, not only for the energy sector in South America, because the model was to take up what you call, what we in the energy sector would have called the Aberdeen model, where a lot of areas would have used a single shipping area to be the hub of storage, bunkering, repairs, maintenance, chandlering. Galeota Point in 2013-14 was earmarked to be just that. Now, Guyana is looking at building their own ports and so on right now. But if we had our port ready to go, it is an alternative that would have been a very low cost for Guyanese operators to bring and park their vessels here. And look at these small business opportunities in communities like Mayaro, in terms of the setting up of all these companies that could, I mean, from selling food to bunkering to navigational services to debarnacling. The function of the Galeota Point facility, together with the energy sector, the facility would have been designed to take what you call the Panamax Class 2 vessels. So any ships coming across the Panama Canal before it heads to Europe could have landed at Galeota, refuel, bunkered, do any type of maintenance. There was I think an 80-hectare storage facility that was also in the plan for that facility. Now, suffice to say, those are the kind of creative things that a government, this government, ought to be looking at in terms of where you have a sector that is ready and has capacity. I have no problems with finding some new ones. It is important. But something like Galeota in the energy, when you're looking at energy being one of the biggest earners of foreign exchange for us, services, you can't go wrong with services. And that is something that I keep urging on several occasions in the Parliament. I have urged the Minister of Energy to look seriously at completing the phase 2 of that facility in Mayaro.
Just if I may, just to tie in both questions. This is one of those projects that the government found, when it assumed office and did not proceed with. The construction of the Children's Hospital and other hospitals were part of a medical tourism initiative that the government chose not to proceed with. We did not have to be where we are today, even with COVID. But the government took a deliberate decision to stop progress on things that were being done, on policies and programs that were being done with a vision going forward to create new industries and new capacities and new revenue generation, and replaced our plans and our programs for the country that were in trend, and they replaced that with a roadmap that crashed. They replaced it with zero. The result is where we are today, where we have no choice, where the government, the minister claims he has no choice but to borrow to pay goods for goods and services, to pay recurrent expenditure. As was told previously, what is required simply is to take some of the money being borrowed and invest it in revenue generation. They have not done that, as my colleague indicated, and the result of that would be a continuous spiral into further debt.
There was one little thing that came up in Parliament. Marvin Gonzalez, the Lupino MP, used the phrase political Jezebels. And I thought, well, it wasn't reined in as unparliamentary at the time, and maybe it happened too quickly, I don't know. But I don't know if there's anything more that needs to be said about it, any response to that phrase.
If I may, as one of the newer members, I don't think we would want to comment on the honorable gentleman describing himself. And I thank you all very, very much.
Thank you very much.
members of the Review and Audience. Have a great day. Be safe, everybody.